Well, hello. Welcome to Mark Sport. This one for this week is quite different, if you like, because I don't have Paul on my side and I don't have Mark Namanya on the other. So it's just me. And I'm going to give you snippets for this week. And later in the week, of course, they'll join me and we will talk more sport. I'm going to give you snippets, however, about a few things that are making the headlines in world sport. Largely, it's about World Cups and Africa Cup of Nations and Islamic Games, and then also the return of the European leagues in this weekend, because the European leagues have been off because of all this international action, and now they're back. So I'll be saying one or two things about who I think will be beating who, or who I think will be losing to who. But for starters, there's a lot of World Cup talk. That World Cup talk is because of Uganda playing at the Under-17 World Cup for the very, very first time. Our boys, we've been saying this the last 3 weeks, have made history. They went to Qatar, qualified for Qatar and went there and actually made a splash. Ultimately, we got knocked out by Burkina Faso, but not before Uganda made the headlines that we think are going to stick around the world of football for a long time. The Cubbs, if you remember, were grouped with France and Chile and Canada. And we didn't think they'd be coming out of this group. Well, they did. They left it for last, and that made for the drama because they lost against Canada on the opening day despite leading for a very long time. And then they played really well in drawing with Chile. And after that, they had to win against France just to squeeze into the last round of 32. As a third-place team. And they did. Beat France, got into the round of 32, beat Senegal in there, and then got into the round of 16, where they got knocked out by Burkina Faso, 1-1 draw, leading into that shootout in which we did not quite bathe ourselves in glory, but hey, we'd already achieved, and we think, we believe that these boys have made history. They have done Uganda really proud, and they have actually established us on the world map because everybody has stood up and noticed. And so I believe personally that it's about time that the agents got rolling, that the clubs stood up and noticed, the big European clubs, that the scouts from Europe got in touch with these players and their managers and their management teams, and actually took a few of our boys out there so they could start their careers in Europe a little earlier than we've been used to with some of our players who have managed to play in Europe eventually. A very long time ago, Majid Mosisi went to Stade Rennes in France. That was 1992. He was well over 20, if you remember. He had hit peak from 1986 all the way up to 1992, blazing Uganda, East Africa, and the continent with all sorts of goals before he eventually got the opportunity that took him to France and later to Turkey, where he played for two top star clubs in Dardanelspor and Bursaspor, made quite a bit of money, made a huge name. It took us a very long time before we had players playing in Europe again, but recently, there have been really, really many. I mean, there were so many trials in between from 92 to date of players that were really good but couldn't make it for various reasons. But eventually, Ibrahim Sekaja got a lot of success playing out of Austria. And then David Obua got a lot of success playing out of Scotland. And then eventually guys have followed. The Farouk Mias have gone in there and played. And currently, almost the entire Cranes team, I mean, okay, not entire, but half the Cranes team actually play in Europe. Some at really big clubs in Eastern Europe, and others playing within the UK, that is England and Scotland, lower division and higher division, as you know, with our players. You've got, Aziz Kayon at Slovan Liberec in the Czech Republic. That's a really big club. And you've got Elio Caprodosi at FC Cluj in Romania. That's a really big club. You've got guys playing all over Europe, and then you've got, like I said, the guys who are actually playing out of England. Toby Sibic at Burton Albion. You've got the pair of Jordan Obita and Ochek Peazo playing in the Scottish League, and on. We would want for our kids actually to go a little earlier. And I'm thinking this might be it. Because what has happened is that the Cubs have actually made a great name. When the tournament first started out, the name on everybody's lips was James Bourgaret. Scored against Canada in the losing effort, scored that famous winner against France, and everybody stood up and noticed Bourgaret as the man who was the star for Uganda. Goals scored, two good goals, actually two well taken goals, putting him on the map. But virtually everybody else has stepped up. Three other guys managed to score for Uganda. The last one, of course, being Nkola, as you saw him in that game against Burkina Faso with a very beautiful goal. Before that, Derek Sozi had scored against Chile. Abubakari Walusimbi actually scored against Senegal. So those guys, just for getting their goals, you think have basically got the attention of a few scouts, a few agents, a few big clubs. But so many other players have actually stood out in that under-17 team, that historical team, without necessarily getting on the score sheet. I mean, take Idrissa Waibi, the goalkeeper. I thought that he was outstanding. That game against Senegal, and the one against France, actually, and the ones against Senegal, that was outstanding goalkeeping from the young Idriss Waibi. And some actually asking, are these some of the best performances from a Ugandan goalkeeper on the international stage? Well, it's the World Cup and no other team has been there. But you think that there's been a few better performances than that. But hey, the comparisons just, with Onyango, maybe at an AFCON or in World Cup qualifiers with, or so much earlier with maybe a Sadiq Wassa at the Sekafa and all, are good enough to tell you that Waibi has actually knocked on the door. And there's a few other guys who are involved in those goals who didn't score. Elvis Torach for one. And maybe, say, Hamza Sengoba, wearing the captain's armband, creating goals for Bourgaret and Walusimbi and everybody else. And then, Brian Jara, I thought that he had a very good tournament. Or maybe Okello. There's so many of these guys actually played really well. So we hail them, and we are hoping that it accounts for something ultimately. But remember, I told you here before, the World Cup under-17s has been turned into an annual event by FIFA. What does that mean? Is that there's so many Bourgarets and so many Sengobas, so many Okellos and Waibis that are going to be popping up every year. Because now these guys are out. They can't play at that level again. They'll have to play for us next at the under-19s. But there's another under-17 team cropping up because they have to qualify for the World Cup next year and try and be in that. And those kids are making a huge splash in the regional qualifiers, the Sekafa qualifiers, up in Ethiopia. You might not know the names yet, but you'll get to know them ultimately, because these kids have done great things already. There was a 9-0 thumping of Sudan that has got everybody oohing and ahhing. We'll wait and see where that comes, where that amounts to, how far these kids can go, but we are hoping that they can emulate the group in Qatar and also make it to the World Cup. Now, when I talk European clubs start taking notice, standing up to notice, let me tell you this, because one or two of you out there might actually not know. James Bourgaret, even before this World Cup and the name he has made in Qatar, had already been noticed. Now, we've talked about here Masaka Sunshine on this show before. Now, the academy is actually El Cambria in Masaka. That academy has produced some of the players that have actually shown for Uganda at this level, and they've done a great job. I told you that Elvis Torach and Hamza Sengoba, the guys who were involved in creating the goal for Bourgaret, those two plus Bourgaret actually all came from this academy in Masaka, and they created history by scoring that goal, by combining for that goal against France, which took Uganda into the knockout phases. But they continue to produce them. They've got more players even playing in Ethiopia as well. Now, Bourgaret himself actually is somebody that has already been noticed up in Europe. How does this happen? The man who started El Cambria, Thomas Tuchel, was the Danish man, Thomas Tuchel, was actually a former coach of the Manchester United striker Rasmus Højlund. Remember, Rasmus Højlund is now playing on loan in Napoli in the Serie A, scoring goals there, and has scored goals for Denmark in great form. that has actually taken Denmark into the playoffs for the second round, trying to reach the World Cup. Rasmus Højlund actually knows James Bourgaret. They're in constant contact, so not too many surprises that our Bourgaret actually scores goals, because maybe he's got the inspiration from the bigger man. Now, there might be a few criticisms from Man United fans of Rasmus Højlund, but he's only a kid himself, by the way. We might talk about Bourgaret being in the under-17 team. Rasmus Højlund is barely 23. He's not even there yet. And yet he's been scoring goals for Atalanta, and then for Man United, he's got more than 20 on his books already. Some might think it's a low tally, but he's got lots of goals for Denmark and for Napoli, like I just said, both in the Serie A and in the Champions League. And actually, Bourgaret, because of that connection with Rasmus Højlund and Thomas Tuchel, he and two others from Cambria actually went last year and did some trials at AGF Aarhus. AGF Aarhus is one of the biggest clubs in Denmark, and the kids came back. So they are on the radar of Danish clubs, and now hopefully after James Bourgaret's heroics in Qatar, their radar has expanded to more than just Denmark, to the rest of Europe. We'll see how that pans out, and if one of them can go and open the doors for the others, well, good luck. Now, I'll leave the Cubbs at that, because they've done great things in Qatar and Ethiopia. But we've got an AFCON coming up. AFCON 2025 in Morocco kicks off just a month from today. I'll give or take a few days. And we are gearing up for that as well. The seniors do not want to be left out of the party, if you know what I mean. They had their own heroics when they did some great things in World Cup qualification, came really close to making the playoffs here in Africa, when they qualified for this AFCON itself, and then also when some of them actually participated in a historic CHAN tournament hosted by Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, in which Uganda got out of the groups for the very first time before getting knocked out by Senegal in the quarterfinals. Now, these guys have had two international friendlies during this break because they're preparing to take on Tunisia, Tanzania, and Nigeria in Group C at the AFCON when it starts in December towards Christmas. And what did they do? They beat Chad 2-0 and then lost 4-0 to Morocco. Now, no shame really in the loss to Morocco, I'll tell you, because Morocco actually, for me, are the best team in Africa. They've been for about, 3, 4, 5 years now. I believe Morocco are the best team in Africa, and they did not spare the cranes in this friendly with who they fielded. Top-class names that roll off your lips from Europe. I mean, Brahim Diaz from Real Madrid, that perhaps the biggest club that sent a player to Morocco for this break. Brahim Diaz was on that pitch, but so were guys like Azzedine Ounahi, and then the former Man United player, Sofiane Amrabat, who now plays at Betis. And not former, okay, Sofiane Amrabat is former, but Nasri Mazraoui actually is still a Man United player, current Man United player, and one of their reliable ones. Even if he's struggled with injury and has been coming off the bench for United, is one they're going to miss at AFCON. These guys were there. I mean, El Khanousi, Leicester City player on loan to Stuttgart, actually scored the penalty, the third goal for Morocco against Uganda. Plays out of Stuttgart in Germany, but he's on the books of Leicester City. And on and on and on. Basically, Morocco is just filled with these guys. They didn't have Ashraf Hakimi. He's injured from PSG. And Bono wasn't in goal, but they have virtually all the stars. Most of the guys born in Europe, especially in Spain and the Netherlands. But ultimately, they all play for the country of their roots, Morocco. So, and they invited Uganda because they felt that Uganda would give them a very good test. That, I think, because of our heroics at CHAN, our heroics in the World Cup qualifiers, and now we qualified for this tournament. But also, I think, because Morocco, we are hoping that they would use this as Uganda as preparation for some of the countries that might have a similar style that are going to be in their group. Remember, Morocco are in the same group as Mali and Zambia and the Comoros Islands. So I'm thinking largely, because Zambia are from our region, Morocco thought this might be the test that gives them a feel of what Zambia will be like. And I don't think they were too wrong. They're not too far off. We've played in this region with Zambia for a very long time. There are similarities between us, our cultures and our football. The Zambians might be a little better historically, but largely we present the same challenges that Morocco might face in that game. And if you remember, only recently, Vipers themselves, our club, played against a Zambian club in the Champions League, and you saw how that was when they played against Power Dynamo. So I think Morocco made the right choice, but it helped Uganda as well. Paul Put and his team know where they stand. They played against Morocco. That gives them a feel of what they will face when it comes to that group game against Tunisia, because Morocco and Tunisia are similar styles, if you like. North African football is of a certain brand. So, and Paul Put, I saw him, his head in his hands when we considered the penalty that meant that we considered a third, after which we soon considered a fourth, and Put was despairing. But I believe that it's an eye-opener for him and for his coaching staff and for the players about what to expect at the very highest level, because sometimes it's good to lose before going into major tournaments. Why, especially for these grands? It's because they had gotten too big, if you like. They've been winning and winning and winning. Lots of matches won in the World Cup qualifiers. Towards the end, as you saw, beat Mozambique here at home and Somalia, and then went away and won against Botswana. Came very close to beating Algeria away before they conceded the penalties that they did from some dodgy calls, if you like. And in that period, they'd also, like I said, done all the things they'd done at Chan, and they were looking and feeling good. So Morocco brings you down to earth, takes you back to the drawing board, a month to kick off, and holds you in good stead. I liked what Paul Put did with the team, how he juggled between the guys who played against Chad and the guys who played against Morocco. That means that he was testing out some of the players, perhaps who haven't cemented their places in the final squad, and then those who haven't cemented their places in the starting lineup. We know there are some sures. Unless they get injured between now and December 20th, we know there are players who are going to be starting in that team virtually. It's self-naming. But there was a test for Dennis Chigun in goal, the Vipers goalkeeper, because he kept goal against Chad in that win, the 2-0 win, and he also came on for Dennis Onyango towards the end of the game against Morocco. So, that was a good test for him. At the back, Jordan Obita played both games in central defense. Elio Caprodossi was not available. Obita had two different partners who we know that will be on the plane to Morocco as well when the time comes. That is, in the first game, he played with Torach, James Torach in central defense. In the second game, he played with Hilary Mokondane. Those two guys are partners at Vipers and partnered in our successes in Chan. And do you think that there will be backups for Caprodossi and Jordan Obita when the time comes in Morocco? But and at fullback, the same guys played both games. Habat Achai at left back, who we know will be deputizing Aziz Kayondo at the AFCON, and then Toby Sibik, who has now cemented the right back slot as his own, ahead of Gavin Chizito, ahead of Kenneth Semakula, who sometimes plays there, ahead of Elvis Bomono, who actually was not even part of the squad and whose place actually in Morocco in December is in doubt. So that's how it was with the back five. And then in the middle, Paul Put had a different three for both games. Against Chad, he started Bobosi Biaruhanga, who's been on the outside, on the fringes, the guy who plays out of Auckland in the US. And he had the new guy, Al Hassan Baba, as his partner, with Joseph Mpande ahead of them. Mpande, if you recall, actually plays his football in Vietnam. So that was the midfield three, with the front three of Melvin Lorenzen, who has been called to the Cranes before, but had not played or even started until this game against Chad, and he actually started and scored in that game. And then Uche Ikpeazu Mobiru, who had not started the game for Cranes, was coming on off the bench for his first few caps for bit part plays here, 5 minutes there, 7 minutes there, and all, hadn't even impressed at all, but he also scored in this game against Chad, and that holds both players in good stead. And then, of course, the third man to play with them was Regan Mpande from SC Villa, the guy who was one of the stars at Chan and who we think has now, with these two friendlies, actually cemented his place on that plane to Morocco. He should be back up when that time comes. So that midfield three of Al Hassan Baba, Bobosi Biaruhanga, and Joseph Mpande played against Chad. But then against Morocco, reverted to his original midfield three, the one that we think will actually be starting when AFCON comes around. That is Khalid Aucho, the captain, and then alongside him, Kenneth Semakula, who plays his football out of Saudi Arabia. Aucho plays for Singida in Tanzania. And then you've got Alan Okello, of course, our star man, the star boy from Vipers. That was the midfield three for the game against Morocco, with the front three in which Ikpeazu dropped out, and then Stephen Mukwala came in, but Lorenzen kept his place, and then so did Regan Pande. Eventually, he made the subs, Paul put, but you can tell what that team looks like, and I have huge hope that actually they can make a splash in that group, even if it has two teams against which will be very underwhelming underdogs. Nigeria, giants of African football, winners of this AFCON twice already, and then, of course, Tunisia, who have always beaten up on us, the North Africans. They've actually fared better against us than even Morocco. They fared better against us than Algeria and even Egypt. But hopefully, this is the time when we turn this around with a team which I believe is actually a very, very good one to compete. So that's what it looks like for Uganda. The Cubs in Qatar and Ethiopia, and the Cranes in Morocco. That's where we start. Ugandan football right now is actually a big, big buzz, and you can tell on all the social media platforms how they have attracted the attention. So I'll leave Uganda